Welcome, everyone. My name is Pat McGinnis, and I'm the Executive Director of California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. I will tell you, before I turn it over to the rest of the folks, just take a look at our website. You'll find a lot of information on the front page about Laguna Honda, including our fact sheets, although we'll be referring to them throughout. And please do, if you have questions, this is being recorded. Is that correct, Maura? Yeah. It's being recorded, so if you want a recording afterwards, please let us know. Meanwhile, we will be opening it up to questions towards the end, and so welcome, and I hope that you have, I hope we can answer your questions. If not, please email us afterwards and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. I'm going to turn mine on mute now.
Okay. So now we'll turn it over to Tony Chicotel, staff attorney from California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform.
Thanks, Maura. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this town hall about the Laguna Honda decertification and potential transfer discharge of residents. I'm happy to be here. This is our second town hall. There's been some updates since the last one, which was about 3 weeks ago, I'd say. But a lot of things have stayed the same, and we just want to reinforce a lot of the messages that we had in that first town hall. But I'm really glad you're able to make it. We have some partners with us today. Cantor has some partners with us today that I would like to introduce to the group and have them say a few things. And then I'll go into a formal presentation that I promise you will not be too long, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And then we'll move to questions and answers. We're scheduled to go out till 2:30. Hopefully we'll answer all the questions very efficiently, and we won't need to take till 2:30, but we've got that time if you need it. Okay, so the first part I want to introduce is Legal Assistance for the Elderly, Carol Betancourt.
Hi, everybody. Yes, as Tony said, I'm Carol Betancourt. I'm the healthcare attorney at Legal Assistance to the Elderly, and we offer free legal services to folks who live in San Francisco who are 60 and older or younger adults with disabilities. So basically that probably covers all the patients at Laguna Honda. And we have been contacted by a few patients at Laguna Honda, but not that many. But anybody with questions, whether they have a discharge notice or not, can call us and we can advise. Our phone number's in the material. And also you can email us if that's easy at healthcare@laesf.org. Thanks. And thanks to Cantor for putting this on.
Thank you, Carol. Next, Emma Dinkelspiel from Bay Area Legal Aid.
Hi, so happy to be here today. My name, as Tony says, is Emma Dinkelspiel. I'm an attorney with the Health Consumer Center at Bay Area Legal Aid. We're a subsection of Bay Area Legal Aid. We, like our main organization, we provide free advice and assistance to individuals in the Bay Area, but unlike our main program, we are able to assist people regardless of income or assets. We have no financial restrictions on our services. So if anybody who is currently at Laguna Honda needs legal advice on a healthcare matter, it's possible we would be able to give advice or assistance, and we have a phone line active from 9 to 1, 5 days a week. It's 9 to 1 at the moment because we're half staffed, and that number will also be available in the materials for people who have questions or need to call. Please do call that dedicated healthcare line.
Thanks, Emma. And next, Elizabeth Zerker from Disability Rights California.
Thanks, Tony, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Zerker. My pronouns are she, her. I am a managing attorney with Disability Rights California, which is California's protection and advocacy system, and we do work in a variety of issues affecting people with disabilities, including seniors. DRC has developed a fact sheet as well as a sample appeal request for residents of Laguna Honda Hospital. Those are on our website and they're translated into multiple languages. So we'll put that in the link for you as well. And we've been working with Cantor, Justice and Aging, and other organizations in putting pressure on CMS to slow down what's going on at Laguna Honda and address some of the terrible events that have been occurring as a result of this rush to push people out of the facility. So thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, I'm going to start the slideshow. Can you see the screen okay? My screen? All right, great. So welcome, everybody. Just a reminder, this town hall is being recorded, so when we get to input from Laguna Honda family, residents, advocates, just be aware that it is being recorded. It will be posted on the internet, and so we want to discourage you from disclosing personal information that you wouldn't want out there for the public, especially regarding the patients or the residents. So just be aware. I had this slide, we were going to do the introductions on this slide, but I thought it'd be nicer if you could see everybody while they were doing this, the introduction. So, but here's the information related to contacting our California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform or any of our partners. I should mention, what is CANNR? CANNR is a nonprofit organization. We've been around since 1983. Long story short, we fight for the rights and the well-being of long-term care consumers in California. We're a nonprofit. We do not charge for our services. We have a fairly small staff and a fairly high demand for services, so sometimes we're not able to do everything that we'd like to be able to do for residents. But in the case of Laguna Honda, we've been quite involved in counseling, giving help to residents and their family members especially regarding transfers and discharges, but also related to quality of care in the facility. All right, so I'll try to move through this pretty quickly. This is just a general recap of what's happened at Laguna Honda related to how we got to this point. I could do a whole hour and a half just on how we got to this point. I want to be very general here. And if there's still a fair amount of uncertainty among the people in the town hall, please ask questions about how we got here. But just real quickly, there's been, Laguna Honda has been decertified by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That's the federal government. The federal government provides the bulk of Laguna Honda revenues through Medicaid, the Medicare and the Medi-Cal programs. Most of the residents who get care at Laguna Honda are covered by Medicare or Medi-Cal, sometimes both. And most of that money comes from the federal government. And to get that federal money every year, the facility has to be certified. And there's recertification surveys. At this point, CMS has told Laguna Honda that it's been decertified, but in the meantime, they are going to continue to provide funding sort of on an emergency basis through September 13th in order to give the facility a chance to wind down the affairs of providing care to approximately 700 residents. The continued funding was contingent on creating a closure plan. The closure plan calls for discharging or transferring all of the residents by September 13th. So it creates this really unusual and very difficult situation. You'll see in the first bullet point I have in the parentheses, was the poor care deliberate that led to the decertification, or was it just simple incompetence at Laguna Honda? This was a question that someone posed before the town hall, and I wanted to address it up front. I don't really have the answer specifically, but I don't think it was deliberate. I'll put it that way. I would be very, very shocked if there was some people sort of twisting their mustache, thinking of ways that they could get all the Laguna Honda residents out and start over and demolish the building and put condos on it. I think it's more the latter. I just think that there's been some poor management in the past. There's been some scandals in recent years and some pretty serious quality of care issues recently identified by CMS that led to the decertification. As we've told lots of media outlets, we don't think that the level of non-compliance with the regulations, the problems with the quality of care are the same as they are in other terrible nursing homes in California. We think that there's much more ripe facilities out there for decertification, but Laguna Honda was picked for decertification, and that's what we're stuck with. Okay, so now we have the implementation of the closure plan, which calls for trying to transfer discharge 700 residents into safe and appropriate locations, and that's been difficult, to say the least. We've had residents going to inappropriate, unsafe locations like homeless shelters, and nursing homes that have a historically bad record of providing care, much worse, I would say much worse than Laguna Honda's. There's been, I think at this point, something like 57 transfers and discharges. I haven't received a call yet from any of those 57 residents or family members saying, this worked out great for us. It's been very difficult. And as you see in the last bullet point, or the last main bullet point, there's been some deaths of residents who have been sent out. If you've done this for a while, you understand that the deaths are kind of unavoidable. It happens in almost every closure case. We're talking about highly vulnerable residents who rely on other people to provide virtually all the care necessary to keep them alive. And you take all that knowledge that those caregivers have built up and the skills that they've built up caring for these individuals, and you erase it and move them into another facility, maybe a great facility, but the staff are all strangers to this particular resident, and it typically doesn't go well. I want everybody to know that if there are residents, families of residents out there who have had their residents go to other facilities and they're suffering, please let us know. We will advocate to get them back into Laguna Honda. If the residents tragically passed away, we want to know about that too, because I think that the reporting of the recent deaths has made a big difference. When we get to the updates, I'll cover that. I also want to talk about procedural failures at Laguna Honda related to the transfers, discharges. I know a lot of the transfers and discharges have taken place without having actually given the resident written advance notice, which is illegal. In some cases, the written advance notice has come, but it was delivered only a day or two before the proposed discharge. And the law requires that the discharge notice be given at least 30 days in advance. There's an exception to the 30-day notice when the facility is closing, but Laguna Honda's own words, I covered this in the first town hall, indicate that the facility is not in fact closing. So I don't think that exception applies, but even if it did, the written notice must still be given reasonably in advance. And I argue that a day or two is not nearly enough in advance for someone to do their homework on whether a proposed discharge is going to be safe and appropriate. All right, so some updates. I got 3 updates I wanted to cover. The big one is the pause. Sounds like the name of an interesting book or something. So the pause is a temporary, we don't know how long, but a temporary cessation of transfers and discharges from Laguna Honda. I really hope that doesn't mean all transfers and discharges. If a resident finds a safe and appropriate and awesome discharge location, hopefully they'll be able to go. I don't think anyone's going to stop them. But in terms of pushing residents out into situations that are at best just a lateral transfer, there's not going to be a significant improvement, or it's significantly more appropriate, then I think the residents are absolutely going to stay put. I would say probably at least for a couple of weeks, but that was the big news that came out last week. Another important news item is that CMS has hired or contracted with a facilitator, a transition facilitator. As you see, there's a screenshot of part of the notice there. The facilitator's name is Charles Walters, who is probably still trying to get his bearings, having just been made taken this facilitator role. But that's somebody that we is now a resource potentially for residents and family members as it relates to what's going on with the transfers and the discharges. The third thing I wanted to mention is Laguna Honda reported that the results of a recent mock survey. So in order to get recertified, which is the plan at Laguna Honda to get recertified by CMS, they're part of their preparation for that, for these surveys that would allow them to be recertified, is to do mock surveys. And the results of a mock survey, I think it was done at the end of June, it was reported out. And long story short, it didn't go well. There was still lots of potential regulatory non-compliance. So the effort to get recertified, I wouldn't say it's been set back, but there's some reason to be a little concerned about that based on the mock survey. All right, I covered this in the first town hall. I'm not going to cover it in detail again. Just want to make sure that everybody understands that when it comes to transfer and discharging nursing home residents, there's a ton of procedural requirements, a ton. They all have to be satisfied in order for a resident to be sent out against his or her will. And there's additional processes besides this, but these are specific to nursing home residents. All of these boxes have to be checked. Otherwise, the transfer discharge cannot go forward, at least legally. Oh, I want to stress on the reason for the discharge. Again, if the reason for the discharge cited is the closure of Laguna Honda, we have written statements that counter that from Laguna Honda itself, that it's not in fact closing. All right, so what do you do if there is a violation of one of these procedural requirements and Laguna Honda still wants to do a transfer discharge? Residents have the right to appeal. I'll spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's really important. What I've done at the bottom of this slide is to try to give you just, it's not complicated, just a short one-sentence script to use when you call the Office of Administrative Appeals, the 916 number there. I'm requesting a transfer discharge appeal hearing regarding the proposed transfer discharge of resident X who lives at Laguna Honda Hospital. I am really interested to know how, if anybody's requesting hearings, how they're going, if you're getting those hearings, if you're getting resistance to the idea of scheduling the hearings. I'm not aware of any hearings being requested or scheduled at this point. What we've been told, what I've seen that's come from the federal government is that the residents have the right to appeal. They can't appeal the decertification itself. So if your idea is, hey, Laguna Honda should have never been decertified, I shouldn't be forced to lose my home because of that decertification. That's not the idea of appealing a transfer discharge. That's not the intent of the appeal rights. The intent of the appeal rights is the transfer and discharge that's been proposed for me doesn't work. Either the procedural requirements have not been satisfied, or it's an unsafe, inappropriate discharge, and or one of the reasons hasn't been satisfied. So for all the regular reasons for appealing a transfer discharge, the resident should have their rights honored. That's from a document from the federal government, but I think the law on this stuff is really clear. Also, just see that there's a Disability Rights California has a Know Your Rights webpage. If you got the slides in advance of this town hall, you can click it. There's a link there. You can click on that. It'll take you to the webpage. I think it's going to be put, the page is going to be put in the chat here if it hasn't already, so that you can click on that. And it's got some really great information about all of this stuff.
Tony, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Maura.
Do you mind if I make just a brief announcement in case some Spanish speakers joined us late?
Yeah, not at all.
Ok. Si usted está escuchando esta reunión y prefiere escucharlo en español, puede elegir, hay un menú en el menú de Zoom que dice interpretación. Si puede elegir español, de ese menú se puede cambiar y escuchar esa reunión en español. Muchas gracias. Thanks, Tony.
No problem. This was another topic that I covered in the last town hall. I just wanted to reiterate it, that in terms of Medi-Cal coverage being affected by exercising your right to appeal, nothing could be further from the truth. I'm hearing less and less concerns about this being a problem, but just wanted to reiterate, Medi-Cal coverage will be unaffected whether you file your appeal or not. Now, if you lose the appeal, you're still covered by Medi-Cal if you meet the criteria for a nursing home stay, so that's not going to be terminated. So you won't have to go out of pocket. Also covered this in the last town hall, but this is really, really important. Even if a resident somehow lost their transfer discharge appeal hearing and the facility was given the green light to do a transfer discharge, that's just covering the nursing home issues. There are tenancy rights of the residents at Laguna Honda. There was a story in the San Francisco Chronicle today about a resident who's been at Laguna Honda for 44 years. And it was an amazing story, and I encourage everyone to read it. And maybe someone could put the link to it in the chat. But I mean, this guy obviously has tenancy rights. He's been there for a long time. He has all the rights that you would expect of someone who lives in a home and has created a foundation for life in this home. So in order to forcibly remove someone, physically remove someone from their home in California, you got to go to court. You don't get, the facility doesn't get a pass to do that by convincing a nurse in an informal administrative hearing that the facility's met all the nursing home requirements. There's other requirements that apply, other laws that apply, and they have to prove, the facility has to prove in a court of law that they've complied with those requirements. So residents have the right to stick around, and I want everybody to know that. And I'm really encouraging people at this point in time to exercise the right to stick around for any proposed transfer or discharge that doesn't seem quite right. All right, big questions. I don't have the answers to a lot of these questions, but I'll do my best here just to go through what I think people should be considering. How long is the pause? As I've said already, I don't know. I suspect it's going to be for a couple of weeks. I'd be surprised if it was longer than a month. I'd be surprised if it ended this week. I think it's going to be somewhere in between 2-3 weeks, but that's just a total guess on my part, a completely uneducated guess. How do we make the pause permanent? This is an important one. And I think the effort should be to make the pause permanent. And how do we do that? By continuing to raise hell, I think is the short answer. By continuing to write to public policymakers, to call public policymakers at CMS, that's the Department of Public Health, it's the governor, it's the mayor, and tell them that we need more than a pause. We need a termination of the transfers and discharges, and allows Laguna Honda to continue to get funded until they can turn things around and get recertified. It's been a disaster so far. I don't suspect it's going to be significantly better after the pause. There's no magical building, new nursing home that's being erected in San Francisco that's going to be able to take 600 residents and provide them really great care. I think it may just get tighter and tighter. So I think our efforts, a lot of our efforts should be continued to focus on making the pause permanent. Should I reject a proposed transfer discharge? I'm going to say the answer is yes. If the proposed transfer discharge is to another nursing home, I just sincerely doubt that your condition, your care is going to improve. And I think the chances are significantly high that you will not do as well in that new nursing home, at least in the short term. Again, if you're somebody at Laguna Honda who doesn't need skilled nursing level of care, and there's a home or community-based option that's presented to you that's awesome, take it. By all means, take it. I just know that that's sort of a tall order, at least in a large scale. How do you reject a proposed transfer discharge? If it's a verbal, I understand that a lot of the proposed transfers and discharges are not being done with a written notice. It's more of a verbal thing. If it's a verbal proposal, I always recommend this, put it in writing. Put your rejection of an option for a transfer discharge in writing, and use the opportunity to tell Laguna Honda staff what your criteria are for a safe and appropriate discharge. What would it look like for you? Do you need a place in San Francisco because that's where all your friends and family are? Obviously, it's got to be something that's affordable. Obviously, it's got to be a place that's able to provide the level of care that you need to thrive. So it's a good chance, I think, to put your criteria for what a good transfer discharge looks like in writing. If you get a written notice of transfer discharge, I think that you should absolutely request an appeal hearing. If you don't agree with the proposed transfer discharge, I think that's the time where you call the state and ask for a fair hearing. As I tell people all the time, I don't really take proposed transfers and discharges very seriously until there is a written notice. If they're mentioning something verbally, orally, and not putting in writing, I don't think you need to request an appeal hearing at that time. About being readmitted to Laguna Honda, I don't know the answer to that. I'm very skeptical, and I think the residents and family members should be skeptical about residents being readmitted. Going forward, I just think it's going to be tough. Right now, Laguna Honda is not allowed to take admissions. Would a readmission be considered an admission? Maybe, maybe not. And assuming Laguna Honda does get recertified, I'm just not sure what their policy is going to be on readmitting residents. And I'm a little concerned about the legal leverage that residents would have to be readmitted. I don't think there's much.
Tony,
what
could
will
I
happen-
add one
Oh,
thing?
go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we have raised that issue of coming back to Laguna Honda with CMS. And they've agreed to sort of explore it because we know that that's a concern. We've raised that question because it's been coming up.
Yeah, and hopefully that will be made available. We'll definitely push for it. And as I mentioned before, if there's residents out there now who have been transferred or discharged and want to get back in, we can see what we can do to try to make that happen. But again, I'm a little skeptical about whether it will, even if there are promises made. On September 13th, I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that there's still going to be residents at Laguna Honda. I suspect it will be many, many residents still at Laguna Honda. And I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I suspect that the facility will continue to get paid to provide care for them. I don't know if it's going to come from the federal government or from the city and county of San Francisco, but hopefully there will be continued funding and the facility will get recertified. Will it be recertified? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine on that. But some of you probably have a better guess than I do because I've not been there for several years. All right, Elizabeth, you want to talk about home and community-based services, please?
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. Yes, and Center for Medicaid, Medicare and Medicaid Services, that's what CMS stands for. And they are the federal agency that funds Medicare and Medicaid, Medi-Cal services. So I did want to talk about options for people who may want to consider community-based care for themselves or their family member who are living at Laguna Honda Hospital. Because as Tony said, right now the transfers that have happened or that are being proposed are for the majority of the instances, they are not places that are going to provide better care than at Laguna Honda Hospital. But I did want to talk about a number of home and community-based services options which are funded by Medi-Cal. So that's an important point, which is that if you do not have Medi-Cal and if you're only a Medicare eligible person, there are fewer options, but just sticking with Medi-Cal because that's what the majority of folks at Laguna Honda receive. One big important program is called In-Home Supportive Services, which is attendant care for people with disabilities. You can get up to 283 hours of care per month. And there's a link in the slide to how to apply for in-home supportive services in San Francisco. There's also something called the Home and Community-Based Alternatives Waiver, which provides case management. It can provide home health nursing. It can provide additional personal attendant care. And that's another Medi-Cal program that's administered through San Francisco's Institute on Aging. And there's a link there. There's also a really important program called California Community Transitions, which main job is to reach into nursing facilities and help do the transition planning for people who want to return home. CCT, as it's known, can pay for home modifications. It can help people establish housing, pay first and last rent, can buy people furniture, kitchen items, clothing. So it's a very useful program for people who want to leave facilities. The assisted living waiver, that's another alternative to institutional care where you can live in essentially a residential care facility for the elderly with additional supports. There's something called the Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, or PACE, which is kind of like a mini HMO or managed care plan that provides all health care, dental care, home health care. And then finally, there's something called community-based adult services, which is a center-based program that people get transportation to and get nursing and physical therapy and occupational therapy and meals. And so this is not, obviously, there's lots of people who don't have a home to go to from Laguna Honda, but we wanted, for those of you who might have a family member in Laguna Honda, or for those of you who are at Laguna Honda and might have a family member who would be interested in helping you to move home, these are really important programs that people can access as an alternative to institutional care. Disability Rights California has a lot of information on our website, and our phone number is on one of the first slides because we give people counseling about these kinds of programs all the time.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, if people can get out of Laguna Honda and end up in something that's more home-like, I think that's a great outcome for a lot of folks. All right, I only have a couple more slides. I'll be real fast here. This is a case scenario that I covered last time. Just wanted to put a little different wrinkle into it. This is someone who's at Laguna Honda and for all intents and purposes doing very well and is given a potential discharge to a nursing home in Los Angeles with a very poor track record. Should she take it? The answer is absolutely not. And then what I put in here is just a little, again, a script or just an idea for what you would say when you tell the facility, no, I'm not going to take it. And again, I recommend this be in writing. It could be in writing in a number of ways. It could be a text message, could be an email, could be a formal letter. But just say, and this is very brief, obviously. It could be longer. This is why I'm rejecting it. And I need, if you're going to look for places for me, this is kind of what would fit my profile. So just keep that in mind. And then again, now she's given a written transfer notice. What changes there? I still think she should write her opposition, but also request a transfer discharge appeal hearing, a TDA, transfer discharge appeal hearing with the state once you get a written notice. So there's still a petition out there to stop the relocation of residents. We're on the pause, but it's not, again, it's not permanent. It's probably very short term. I think the petition still has a lot of salience, maybe more than ever. Continue to put the heat on our government officials to stop this disaster and allow Laguna Honda to turn the quality of care around and get recertified. And then again, here's our contact information for for anybody out there who needs some help. And with that, I will start taking questions. We'll all start taking questions and hopefully we'll have some answers.
Okay, so we are going to take questions. First, I've been keeping track to some degree of the questions that were put into the chat. If you have a question you would like to ask of our panel, we do ask that you raise your hand if that's available to you. That's using the reactions button, which is in your Zoom menu. You can also drop it into the chat and I'm happy to read it. Eduardo will let me know if there are any questions from Spanish speakers on the Spanish line. But we also just want to reiterate and remind people, this is a public meeting that is being recorded, and we ask that you not share your personal details in the meeting, just because we cannot control who would have access to your confidential health information. So first off, I have a couple of questions from the chat. What is the responsibility of the San Francisco Department of Public Health and Health Commission, and what role did they play or fail to play in the loss of certification?
Well, as I understand it, Laguna Honda is managed by the city and county, and the Department of Public Health is probably the agency assigned to that management. So I think they bear full responsibility for the decertification. I can't think of anybody who bears more responsibility.
If there is someone who's a resident of Laguna Honda that wants to go to a new nursing home in the East Bay or South Bay, but there is no space, and I'm assuming that maybe this sounds like maybe Medi-Cal discrimination type issue, what can people do? Yeah,
I think the answer now would be to raise this with Charles Walters, the CMS assigned transitions facilitator. We've been telling CMS for a few weeks now, maybe a month or so, that we think the nursing homes throughout the Bay Area are practicing rampant Medi-Cal discrimination in refusing to take residents that they could provide care for because they don't want the lower rate of reimbursement that Medi-Cal provides, substantially lower than Medicare. The ideal nursing home resident for most for-profit nursing homes is someone who's coming from the hospital with their Medicare coverage, and they're only going to be there for a few weeks or a month or so. And then you can replace them with someone else coming from the hospital. Their worst, the residents they do not want are the ones who are coming in on Medi-Cal and are going to stay a long time, because that locks up a bed that they can't use for people coming from the hospital with the much more lucrative Medicare. So we've been telling CMS, hey, you need to make some calls to these facilities and ask why they're reporting to the federal government that they have dozens and dozens of available beds, but when Laguna Honda calls, they say, we don't have any beds available. Sometimes the facilities say, well, we don't have enough staff to meet the needs for additional residents. But in this same reporting that they're doing to the federal government, these facilities are reporting that they have no staff shortages. So they can't have it both ways. So I'm hopeful that among other people, Charles Walters will be able to help put some pressure, make some calls to these facilities and say, I suspect I'm with the federal government and I suspect you might be practicing illegal Medi-Cal discrimination. You care to comment on that?
Okay. We're going to take a question right now from Emily Rich. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Emily.
Hi, I have a question about the mock survey. Was the survey of residents or of families or of staff? Who participated in this survey?
Oh, good question. It's not that kind of survey where you sit down and ask people questions or have them fill out a form. This survey is an on-site inspection is probably a better word, where I'm assuming this contractor that's doing the mock surveys sends staff out to watch care being delivered to the residents. They're watching the nurses, they're watching the CNAs, they're watching medication be delivered, they're watching the preparation of the food in the kitchen, and they're experts in the regulatory requirements, and they're finding violations, and then they write those violations up. If I'm not mistaken, Laguna Honda has posted the mock surveys on their website, or at least it seemed very public that there was some discussion from Laguna Honda management about the mock surveys and a disclosure notice about them.
Yeah, it's public information. I was going to try to find it to post it.
I have a second question, although I know other people have their hand raised, and that is, you said to continue to raise hell, and you mentioned the mayor, CMS, and the Department of Public Health. Are there others that you recommend sending letters to or calling?
Yeah, there's a long list. I think probably the most effective would be to Javier Becerra, the head of CMS. I think CMS at this point has the most control over what's happening related to transfers and discharges. To some extent, I think Governor Newsom, the Department of Public Health, the State Department of Public Health. The mayor has really been great on this issue. I don't know if writing to her will change much, or that she really needs to change tax. But I think the state and the Fed, so it would be CMS, Javier Becerra, and the Governor Newsom and the Department of Public Health.
Thank you.
In line with the mock survey, there was a question in the chat if you know what the ongoing issues that were identified were in the mock survey.
I can't recall. There was more than one. I think some infection control problems still. I'm sorry, I don't remember the details.
Tony, there were 13 findings. This is Benson, the ombudsman. There were 13 findings, including care plans were generic and not person-centered, and some abuse-related issues. Grievances were not followed through to conclusion.
Right now.
Anyway.
Are they legally tenants or are they program participants? They're both. You can be both. They're not mutually exclusive. I know that nursing homes historically, in my experience, are surprised to think of themselves as landlords, but they're providers of housing for long term. I mean, that's what they do, among other things.
Hey, Tony, the mock surveys are now posted. Emil and Elizabeth both posted.
All right, great. Thanks.
On the chat. So if you don't want to download that, anybody can download that survey and you'll see what the primary issues were.
I see a question here about being charged after September 13th. Is it viable that the residents will be charged after September 13th? It's possible. If the feds aren't paying Laguna Honda anymore and the city and county decide they're not going to cover it, well, even if they do decide to cover it, they may hold the residents responsible. I'm sure every resident signs an admission agreement saying I will be financially responsible if my health insurance coverage doesn't pay. But even if that's the case, if you are on Medi-Cal, what do you have? How are they going to collect? So this goes back to my legal services days, but you can owe money to people. What are they going to do about it? You can't get blood from a stone. So maybe the Laguna Honda residents, they might be financially liable for their care after September 13th. It's possible. But what does that mean? It means that maybe the facility could check non-payment if they're doing a transfer discharge, but they're still going to have to find an appropriate facility for you to go to. That's part of the procedural requirements as well. So it may change things in one sense in terms of I'm getting a bill every month, but does it change things legally? I don't think very much.
As a follow-up to that, Tony, and I just want to remind anyone who joined a little bit later, we are doing live interpretation. We do ask that English speakers choose English from the interpretation menu. You'll notice sometimes that not everyone can hear each other on the English channel if you don't choose that. So in a follow-up question to that payment issue is, can Laguna Honda go after family members for payment?
The short answer is no. I mean, I could get into all the details as to why, but financial guarantees by third parties in nursing homes are illegal. They cannot be enforced. I doubt that Laguna Honda asked family members to be financially liable in case the resident could or could not pay. Some facilities do that. It's not in the standard nursing home admission agreement that all the facilities have to use. But even if they have it, it's unenforceable.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, I want to speak briefly on the eviction front.
Sure.
Bay Area Legal Aid agrees that nursing home residents are tenants and that they are entitled to the protections of the unlawful detainer process, which is the phrase used for the eviction lawsuit process. And I just want to put on my former housing lawyer hat real fast and say discharge proceedings are very quick. Eviction proceedings can be even quicker. And it is of the utmost importance that if you do decide to stay after a discharge proceeding and to fight it out in eviction court, which, it is maybe a valid option for many people. It may be that the discharge you received was illegal and you do have a right to stay. It may be that they don't have a right to evict you for this, that, or the other reason. And you may want to look into that. It is absolutely vital that you act right away. And you get in touch with, in San Francisco, you get the points of contact for eviction representation. Our Bay Area Legal Aid is one of them, but the Eviction Defense Collaborative is the center hub for that. And again, I can't stress this enough. If that is a route that you choose to go, you decide to stay after a discharge and fight it out in the eviction courts, that you need to be, ready to act very quickly and to work with counsel on that. You don't want to be left out in the cold. And then you may find that you have many rights in that area, but it is important to be ready.
That's when you give us a call. We gave you lots of phone numbers and lots of email addresses.
We're going to go to David Elliott Lewis, if you can unmute yourself.
So what failed? What went wrong? So I'm looking at the mock survey and I see problems with infection control, but what did the state of California say? Why did they fail and lose their certification? Was it due to infection control, or were there too many unanswered complaints, abuse complaints, or what was the problem? Where did the city fall down? I'm trying to understand that. Did the state explain why the certification was lost?
Yeah, okay, so thanks, David. And you're choosing the default as the language. I thought was kind of funny. Like, did you take default in high school?
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, So the determination to decertify the facility is made by the federal government. That was not the state. Nursing homes are regulated in I think, an unusual way, where the federal government and the states act as partners. The federal government gives most of the money, the state administers it, and the state contracts with the federal government to do most of the enforcement and the survey functions. So the state identified ongoing problems at Laguna Honda. There are many. Infection control was one of them. I think elder abuse reporting was another. I think the biggest trigger was the 2 residents who in 2021 left the facility, came back with street drugs and overdosed. I think that was a big trigger for the current decertification. And then once the state identifies these problems and report them, the federal government then looks at those and made the determination to decertify.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna go to Deborah Bauer, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, if we were to meet with the CMS facilitator that has joined, what would be advantageous to mention or not mention to this person? Because I really don't want to move my son unless I come to a desperate place. And then should we send a letter of our beliefs of the appropriate place for our loved one to Laguna Honda before they suggest a place?
Those are good questions. I think in terms of and interested to hear from any of the other partners on this, when you meet with the facilitator, and I strongly encourage you to do that, I don't think there's any information that you would want to withhold.
Okay.
I think you'd want to be completely upfront about these are my expectations about continued care at Laguna Honda or elsewhere, and this is what I think would be best for my loved one. And then of course there's Laguna Honda staff will have their own ideas of, I think, about what would be best. And this facilitator should probably have all that information available. Would I recommend that you put down what your criteria would be in advance of being given a proposed transfer discharge? I think for yourself, it's a good exercise to write down what you think would be important so that you've given it some deliberation. I probably wouldn't share it with Laguna Honda at this point. But one concern I have is at this time, every resident and their family members should have had a meeting, at least one significant sit-down meeting where you went through very carefully about what your criteria would be for a appropriate transfer and discharge. Every resident at this point should have had an exhaustive assessment of their transfer and discharge capacity with lots of input from family members. So if you haven't had that meeting yet, you should definitely have it soon.
I had a meeting with them, which I would say played out more like the quarterly review.
Okay.
And that as I was asking a few questions, I felt mostly they were just giving me resources like CANAR and to look up RIAS, which nobody could spell. And then his doctor, who was on the phone, said, Mrs. Bauer, your son will not have to move out of Laguna Honda unless the place closes, which I thought, wow, I wonder what that means from a doctor. And but since then, I've requested all his medical paperwork as per Benson's suggestions, and all that kind of paperwork. I've requested it, and his discharge, not his summary, but what they have limbed out for him. So that's what I've done. And I am about to, I don't know if I should talk about this, but I'm about to join Louise Rennie as a plaintiff in a lawsuit, and she's going to have a press conference tomorrow at City Hall in front of the mayor's office, which I believe she's basically going to take on CMS, not Laguna Honda. And I just wondered if anybody else has joined us and what anybody else might know about it, and what perhaps you might know.
Deborah, I would advise maybe don't talk about that in this forum. You should.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I would just talk to her as your attorney and check with her law firm. That's what I would advise you.
Okay.
about public statements.
Okay, thank you.
But I do think for your son, whether or not you give something to Laguna Honda about what the ideal placement for him is, I think Tony's point about writing it up for yourself and being really focused on what it is that he gets at Laguna Honda that you feel is so critical for his well-being and care, mental health, physical health. I think, as I recall, I can't remember what your son's issues are, but you might want to think about the perfect community setting for him, which in reality is going to perhaps will be a hard thing to achieve. But I think you really want to. I mean, I think DRC would say it's achievable, but it's not that it's not a lot of work, and it's going to be for everyone at Laguna Honda. It would be something that takes months of planning, resources, real time to discuss. But I think for you, just being really clear on what it is that he needs every day to maintain his well-being is helpful for you, because then you can say, well, this nursing facility gets these reviews. It has this ratio of staff to patient. This amount of behavioral supports, because many places don't have anything like that. So that's what I would advise.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for the question. And one thing I neglected to mention earlier is a lot of the residents have been sent to Burlingame, Skilled, and I know that's been the proposed transfer location for a lot of folks that turned it down. Just wanted to let you know that Burlingame Skilled is in the midst of a massive COVID outbreak, according to data that's reported by the facility to the federal government. Last we saw, 77 residents have COVID and something like 30 something staff members. So obviously, anytime you're looking at a proposed transfer to another nursing home, you want to take a look at the COVID numbers among many other things. But as it relates to Burlingame Skilled, do not go to Burlingame Skilled at this point.
No, my advice is just say no.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is not an appropriate facility for anybody, much less residents of Laguna Honda. So that's my say there.
We have a question. I hope that I'm meeting the needs of this person's question from the chat, but for people who are currently living at Laguna Honda, in the process of recertification, is there an opportunity, or what can they do to advocate for not only for, keeping it open, but for improving care during the recertification process?
Ooh, what a great question. I love that one.
I believe that was Leora. I think that was the intent of her question, so I
Okay.
hope I met her needs.
Yeah, that's great. Very proactive. A couple things just off the cuff on that I would recommend. Anytime that a resident or family member sees a breakdown in care, so if part of the care plan is not being implemented or a regulatory violation, I think it's real important to call the administration's attention to that. Hopefully at this point, they are hypersensitive to any concerns like that and would be very responsive. So this would not only improve the care that your loved one's getting, but also improve the chances of the facility passing recertification surveys and getting recertified. So I think it's real important to call those out and make sure that they get the right attention. And if they're not getting the right attention, let one of us know, one of the partners in this town hall know about it, and we'll see what we can do. I also think it's a really good idea to write to CMS. Javier Becerra is the head of the Health and Human Services Agency, which oversees CMS. But for CMS to know if your care experience has been really great at Laguna Honda, let them know. CMS is going to ultimately decide whether the facility gets recertified. And if they have a lot of input from the people who know best how the care is being delivered that suggests it ought to be recertified, they have to take that into consideration. So letting CMS know what you think about the care, especially if you think that it's particularly good, I think would be really great to write down and to send to CMS.
Okay, we have a question about what is going to happen with the 120 resident rooms with 3 people? Does that mean that Laguna Honda will be reduced by 120 residents even with recertification?
Laguna Honda has already been reduced by more than 120. The census has been reduced by more than 120 residents. Don't worry about the 120 resident thing.
Next, we're gonna-
The 3-bed, that's the issue, is a lot of people are confused because they did have to reduce the number of beds per room. You're only allowed to have, under new rules from November 2016. If you were certified after November 2016, or you were recertified after that date, then you can only have 2 beds to 1 bathroom. And that's what the rule is. It has nothing to do with reducing it by 120, but they've got to rearrange the rooms. So the census is fine, but they do have to rearrange it so there's only 2 beds per 1 bathroom per room.
Okay, we're going to go to Teresa Hoskins. If you could please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. So I just have a question about notification because I, like Deborah, have not received any formal notification from Laguna Honda. The way I found out was also in a meeting, which is like the meeting I have with them every 3 months or so. That's how they kind of threw it in there. Oh yeah, we're moving, everything's closing. They have not formally sent me any type of notification of. So what do I do here? Like when they come at me to tell me that, oh, we're moving him and they haven't officially notified me here.
My first thought is that you should feel good that you haven't been confronted with having to turn down a really awful proposed transfer and discharge the way some residents have.
Okay.
I think that's a source of stress for a lot of people that you haven't had to experience, thankfully, although maybe waiting for it is itself very stressful. I think it's certainly fine for you, and I would maybe even encourage you to reach out to Laguna Honda and look, have you been able to identify any places? Where are you looking? What are you looking for? Let me tell you what my expectations are. I don't see any benefit to just having silence, knowing that all this is going on, and I think you're trying to maybe get in front of a transfer discharge notice just suddenly appearing out of thin air. I think it's good for everybody to be on the same page. And I would really hope at this point, Laguna Honda is communicating with family members routinely about what's going on. It's a little dispiriting to hear that might not be the case.
They're not, but so like I asked the last meeting we had, because they did mention to me at that meeting that about moving him to LA. So I did notify them via you guys, like you guys told me to do by mail to inform them that I will not allow you to do that. So that's basically the only communications that I've had with them, but they don't talk to me. They don't give me any information. They don't tell me where they are at with this process at all. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. What I suspect is what's happening is that they're not finding any places that are agreeing to be a potential placement location. So they don't have any news for you. But sometimes the news is that there is no news. And it's nice to communicate that to people. I know when I have clients and I'm working on their cases and a month or two goes by and there's no news, sometimes it's just good to let them know that, hey, there's no news.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, but Rockport and Brias are trolling Laguna Honda for residents. And that's one of the issues too, is if that's a place, that's a company, nursing home chain that will accept residents from Laguna Honda. So I'd be beware, that's all.
We have a question from Marilee Hearn. I hope I'm saying your name right. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm concerned. It seems to me that there are different situations for different people, the patients there at Laguna Honda. Is there a way of understanding how many people are in what particular position? For instance, how many people have not been notified? How many people have been notified but have said no, that they don't want to be moved? In other words, to have an analysis of what's going on with these, I guess, 400 patients, many of whom don't have someone to speak up for them, and maybe they're falling between the cracks. And that's what worries me. Is there some way to get a better handle on the population? Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I don't really have a good sense of that either. I see Benson Nadell is in the town hall. He's the San Francisco County Long-Term Care Ombudsman who gets, his office is supposed to get copies of all the written transfer and discharge notices. In my back and forth with Benson in the state ombudsman's office, I understand he's getting transfer discharge notices, copies of them. I want to say at one point, maybe a month ago, his office had received maybe about 70 or so. That's out of a population of about 650 residents. So obviously not every resident has gotten a transfer discharge notice. I think it's actually a small percentage. And maybe some of those residents have received more than one. So it might be a really small percentage that have actually gotten a transfer discharge notice. What I suspect is happening is Laguna Honda is proposing transfers and discharges verbally with residents and families whenever a possibility opens up, and there's not been a lot of possibilities opening up. And that when the resident or family member expresses hesitation about that transfer discharge, they move on to another resident. That's what I suspect. Benson, are you out there? Can you talk a little bit about the sort of maybe the different categories of residents and what their experiences are?
First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I was on the other language for a bit before I shifted to English, which is more comfortable than others. We get all the discharge notices. And as you know, Tony, we're working behind the scenes, mostly through you and Eric and other attorneys to widen the window of time between the notice issued and the date of discharge. So far we've had a slackening off of notices, the formal discharge transfer notices. And there are two reasons cited in the notices. The most common reason is facility is ceasing to operate or closing. And very rare exceptions is the other reason for the notice that you no longer need this level of care. And those are for people that are going to be discharged to RCFE or even worse, a navigation. And those individuals, particularly those who go to the navigation sites, have the more capability of filing an appeal. As we know, the elderly are being somewhat picked in terms of easy transfers. If you look at the actual ages of the people being noticed. And so what Laguna Honda is doing is achieving a metric for transfers by having the easy transfers with elderly individuals rather than the more challenging and obstreperous younger population who would file appeals. So the challenge to us ombudsman is to try to get the appeals filed based on reason number one, facility is closing, from family members within the window of time between the notice received and the discharge date. And so we're now telling family members that if they have a discussion that so-and-so is going to a facility, file the appeal, even though the formal discharge notice has not been issued yet. So we received maybe 70 notices total.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say this. I think to Laguna Honda's credit, they've not done what a lot of nursing homes would have done in this situation. I think in a lot of nursing homes, what we would have seen in the last 3 or 4 months would have been just a wide scale, complete disaster of sending residents everywhere around the state, hither and thither. I think Laguna Honda has been much more careful about it. I'm not saying it's been perfect, far from it, but they've been much more careful. And I mean, there's only been 57 transfers or discharges at this point. I don't think CMS is happy about that. But really, CMS bears a lot of blame here about what's happened already. They could have handled this in a much better way, and they made them, and I think they screwed up big time.
Well, look at how many people died as well. I mean, how many deaths have there been so far out of those 58 people?
Yeah, well,
7 or 8?
there's been 4 that have been reported, and then the Chronicle is indicating there's more than 4.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's a pretty high number if there's 58 people.
Yeah, it's been awful.
That's a lot of people.
We have a question from Emily Rich.
Hi, I'm kind of assuming you're not going to know the answer to this, but a pause for an indefinite amount of time without any explanation of what's going to happen during the pause, like, is something going to go on? Are they doing more investigations? I mean, is this something that you've seen procedurally in the past? Just a pause?
No, this is all one of a kind. Never seen it before. I think CMS is sort of making it up as they go along to some extent. That's a great question, though. What's the goal of the pause? And I think what CMS would say, and Laguna Honda maybe would say, is it's to stop the transfers and discharges and try to figure out what's gone wrong up till now and figure out ways to do better going forward with the transfers and the discharges.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Michael Lyon.
Thank you. Considering the fact that that this pause is indefinite, it's going to expire sometime, probably fairly soon, and that we don't know what's going on in the meantime. I think we should be having a demonstration against this and keeping the pressure up that way. I don't know whether it should be at CMS or DPH. They both share responsibility, but I think something like this is necessary. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And we've had some discussions about that here at Canner. I have 3 young kids who have never really been to a demonstration. I would love to take them to one. So hopefully the members of this town hall would be interested in putting something like that together soon.
Yeah, I talked to the Gray Panthers about that, and we've been communicating, and with Michael too. We talked about doing a demonstration in front of Laguna Honda some time ago. We've been kind of overwhelmed just with emails and calls, but if you need any support on doing something like that, either you, Michael, or Art, or whatever, please let us know. But I mean, we've got a good mailing list now. We've got a lot of good people who are residents and family members, relatives who are on our email list. We could certainly let people know, and we've got a good media list too. But as someone said, it would be nice if the New York Times and the Washington Post picked this up. And it seems like our politicians only really care about the publicity. You put enough on it.
Next, we have a question from Ron. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Ron Stuhler. Oh, I'm sorry, Ron. I think I messed you up by trying to help you. If you could hit unmute one more time.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This just occurred to me, or it came up when the last gentleman talked. Somebody, who was Deborah, brought up something that was going on tomorrow at City Hall, and it had to do, it didn't sound like a demonstration, but so I'm just trying to stay on top of everything. I kind of felt like Deborah was cut off a little bit from saying what was going on, because if it's open to the public, I would like to know. Is there, can she go ahead and put it in the chat if, what's going on at City Hall, what time, and mention something about a person's name, Louis Renee, or Renee, something like that. Is that something that can be shared with us, or at least me, so I can go down there and check it out?
It looks like Deborah is putting something in the chat, Ron, so we'll make sure that you get the information that you need.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a comment or question from Art.
Hi, My name's Art. I'm with the SF Gray Panthers, and I want to second Michael Lyon's suggestion that there be a demonstration. I think the SF Gray Panthers would love to support that and participate. If there's somebody willing to, I think maybe the Gray Panthers could, through our general email address, Michael, could we accept people's emails? And if you want to put that email address in the chat or announce it. And the other thing is, I think we should write letters to the editor based on today's article. It's a very good article. And that's a great time when the Chronicle publishes an article, you write a letter to the editor in response, and we put our demands. SF Gray Panthers have a list of demands. I put them in the chat. And so I suggest those two things, that we get organized for a demonstration, and two, everybody who can possibly do so, send a letter to the editor, and maybe one of them will get published, or one or more will be published, and do it ASAP.
Art, just to clarify what you said about the emails, just because I want to remind everybody that the chat is, and anything that is said on this is public, and that this video is going to be posted on YouTube. So don't read out your email address, your personal email address or your phone number onto the video, or post it in the chat. But it would be great if people consulted the resources provided in the PowerPoint to reach out if they're having legal trouble, and Art, and obviously that doesn't apply to institutional emails that people are sharing. I just want to remind everybody, don't put your personal email in the chat. It is public. Or your
Art,
personal
can
phone
you
number.
put in an email where people could reach the Gray Panthers so that if
Yes.
they're interested?
I think
that would be
Michael,
better.
I think Michael Lyon's going to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be good. Just put a generic email where people who are interested in a demonstration said, yeah, I'm interested.
It's an organizational email, so it's not personal.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much, Art. Okay, so we are coming close to the end of this event, and wanted to check in with our the different legal services representatives and Tony, see if there's any last comments before we close. You're muted, Tony. I'm sorry.
I'll say when I get a call or email from someone from Laguna Honda, I give it a high priority. I'm happy to talk to family members or residents who call us, work for Canner. If you've got any concerns at all about quality of care at Laguna Honda, transfer discharge, what's going on with CMS, can we get a demonstration, all that stuff, feel free to get in touch with me. My email address is tony@canner.org. It's real simple, Tony, Tony, @canner.org.
And if Tony's not available, we've got a number of staff folks here who'll be more than happy to, we can take your call and we can take your emails and things like that. And the recording will be available tomorrow afternoon. Emil just told me.
I've also put the contact information for our legal services partners in the chat as well. So we've got information on legal assistance for the elderly, Bay Area Legal Aid, and Disability Rights California. I'm also going to put a link to today's slide presentation in the chat right now. But want to thank all of today's speakers and presenters for their time. Thank you all for your time and for your passion on this issue. Definitely the pressure has been kept up.
Can I ask a question more? There's one thing wanting to know, when is the next interim survey? And that's a good question. I have no idea. Anybody know?
I'm sorry, Pat, what was the question?
It says that when is the next survey for Laguna Honda?
I think the official survey, the next survey, to be recertified, Laguna Honda has to have 2 surveys that they get a passing grade on. I think the first one will be done in September, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
And then there's a requirement that I think at least 3 months or something, like 60 days or 3 months pass before the second one is done. So that puts us at the end of 2022.
Mm.
And I also want to mention, I'll just say thank you to all the people in the town hall. I know many of you have been so incredibly persuasive and eloquent in your advocacy for the residents, and for yourselves and for your community. And I think you've had a major impact on the way this has gone. I think that we've saved some lives together.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate all the work of the people in this, a lot of the people in this town hall. So thank you very much.
Okay, with that, everyone have a great afternoon and keep up the pressure. Thank you so much.